Welcome to Permission to Shift, the show that helps you remove limits, transform fear, and get into a life that you're excited to live. Today's guest is Jennifre Sethre. As president and CEO of multiple consumer product and technology companies, Jennifre has always been motivated to create big change wherever she has gone. A staunch advocate for equality, she is the owner and founder of Entry, a groundbreaking software system assisting resume writers in avoiding the 127 points of bias that can prevent their resumes from being seen or selected. Her current project, Antibias.tech, pioneers AI technology as a tool to tackle bias in hiring from the HR side of the equation by addressing the corporate software systems that companies worldwide use to streamline resumes and providing a bias rating to pinpoint where these systems can be improved. She's recently back from a trip to Washington, where she isn't just looking to make changes in the corporate world, but in the government and military as well. Thank you so much for coming on and being here today, Jennifre. I'm so excited to have you.
Thanks for having me. I feel honored to be here. You know, I love you and adore you.
And I love and adore you too. And I can't believe that we only met a few short weeks ago. And I cannot wait for everybody to hear. Yes, thank you, Donna. If you're watching this.
Yes, you are the best.
All of the love. Yes. This blossoming friendship you facilitated.
She did. I mean, she did. Donna Brown, you are the best. And only good things are coming to your way.
Yes, absolutely. And for anyone out there who doesn't know who you are, Jennifre, can you give us a overview of how you got to where you are right now and some of the bigger shifts you had to make to get here?
Yes. I think when we first talked, you talked about this permission to shift, which I know I keep coming back to it every single time we talk, but I think it is amazing. And, you know, so I've run a couple of public companies. I've started and sold 2 companies, and I started a company a few years ago called Entry, which was, and it still exists. It still works. It's still fabulous. And it is essentially where people can go in, create a resume. They can copy and paste any job description, create a custom resume. And the tricky part is that no one else does that we do is we actually get them through the applicant tracking system software. And people don't know what they're up against, and that there are so many barriers to getting their resume in front of a hiring manager, an HR person, that has nothing to do with the fact if they have the skills or not. It's that they are being parsed out because they either went to the wrong school, they have the wrong zip code, they used the wrong font, maybe they're the wrong gender that they're looking for that role, maybe they're not the right ethnicity. I mean, there's 127 different reasons why resumes don't get through applicant tracking systems. And you know, we have a really, really high success rate. But a few months ago, as I was thinking about what is it going to take to scale Entry in a way that's going to be meaningful, and we learned some scary things about how digital media works and digital advertising works, and how you can do everything right, but you might get some hair attached to your domain and your URL, and you may make some mistakes, and it doesn't matter how much money you spend on advertising, that, you know, your domain or your name is sort of burnt. So that was kind of scary, but it also facilitated me and pushed me to make pivot into something that is really important to me, and that is eliminating bias in the hiring process specifically. And as you know, we peeled back this onion and we looked at our software, and we had some really good B2B successful plays. When I looked at the 127 different reasons, I was like, oh my God, these are 127 different metrics of bias that resumes aren't getting through applicant tracking system software. And I thought, what else can I do with my software? And I know we built it solid. I know it can work in any existing software environment. And then I met another company called SenseLoaf, and we decided to merge our two technologies together. And then it was like this big, immense, powerful explosion that we realized we could manage the hiring process, and we could anonymize it, and we could make it unbiased, and we could filter candidates down to the HR people, and they could be anonymized. And then we also realized that we could go in and look at all the resumes over the last couple years that hadn't been approved to be seen by the HR people, and we could match them with open job recs that they had, and that we could also go through and find the bias that's embedded in their software. We could find it in their algorithms. We could find it in their parsing systems. We could find it kind of everywhere and give them a bias score. So let's say the top bias score you could get is 150, and this company got an 81. And not to say your company is bad or you're intentionally doing bad things, but to say here are maybe why you aren't getting people of color that are applying. Here's why your workforce isn't diverse. Here's why you're not getting people from other schools, because you have a system in place that's probably been passed on from one head of HR to another and another and another. And maybe they don't know or understand how the technology works. And so there's been this sort of systemic progression of why companies are getting in trouble, why they're getting sued, why people say they're being discriminated against, and it may not even be their intent. And we can find that, and we figured out how to level the playing field. So all the companies who say that that can't be done are wrong. They are wrong.
So 127, that is a massive number. Can you give me some examples?
Yeah, I mean, it's so there are the examples that we discovered early on within entry, right? So that could be, they could parse you out because you came from the same zip code. They could not send your resume through because you used the wrong font. Maybe you used the wrong icon. Maybe you used a circle that wasn't filled in. Maybe you had too many words on it. But the more troubling ones were, they could say, okay, if this person had 20 years of experience, then they could filter you out because you were considered too old for that position. They could say, let's just say you came from an undesirable zip code. They could say, we don't want to hire people from this zip code. They have the capability to filter you out by name. They have the ability to filter you out by the university that you graduated from, or if you didn't attend university. They can filter you out for different companies that you may have worked at, to say, hey, maybe you worked at, I don't know, let's just say you maybe worked at Target, and you don't want to hire anybody from Target because they have one way of looking at things. And this is in no way a reflection of Target. I just couldn't think of a company off the top of my head, right? Or Coca-Cola or whoever, right? And say, they're indoctrinated in this way and they have a hard time pivoting from one culture to another culture. Really? Is that true? Or is it that person's bias that is saying that? It's like saying, I'm not going to interview anybody named Dave because every Dave I've met has been a jerk. Really? I maybe have met one Dave that was a jerk, but I've also maybe met 20 other ones that were really good people. And so how do you address the human bias? And that's what, we address with the anonymization part of it. But other areas that bias is being built in is the kind of AI that people are using. Are they using patterned AI or are they using contextual AI? Because patterned AI allows itself to be easier to increase bias. Now, I know I'm going to get a bunch of people that are going to yell at me for saying that, pattern bias, but I stand by that comment. versus contextual. And contextual is more of a learning AI, and you can build certain stop gaps in it, in layman's terms, to even self-correct your AI as you're building it. And so we can go in and use the different and find the algorithms, excuse me, that some people are using as filters, because the more you use that, it's like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger that arm gets, and the stronger that algorithm gets, saying, hey, we don't want people from this sort of group, or we don't want to hire anybody from this state. I mean, you can filter out, you don't want to hire anybody from other states. And that shouldn't happen. You should really look at the best person for the job, and relocation expenses, or that aside, we've proven in the last 18 months that you can work remotely and still be successful, and still be able to brainstorm, and still be able to be creative, and still keep companies going and growing and thriving, not just surviving.
So I hear a collective uproar in the HR world right now where people are saying, well, don't tell me that my very expensive degree from Harvard, Stanford, MIT, name a bunch of them, is the same as a community college diploma. Because I spent, well, aside from the amount that I spent on it, we're assuming the education level is somewhat higher. Has that been disproven somewhere? Or is that, as you say, just a simple bias and there's no proof?
Well, I mean, okay, so I'm going to use myself as an example. I never finished my college degree. I am 12 credits short. I think I've done pretty well for myself. But there's certainly doors that were shut to me because I didn't finish my degree. I think there is a certain excellence in people who do go through that experience, who do finish it. My story was maybe a little different than other people's, and it doesn't make theirs any less or mine any less, or theirs any more or mine anymore. And I think that, we have to stop having these conversations in the hiring process about what's black or white in education. And I think people who go to Harvard are absolutely brilliant. I also think that people who worked full time and went to a community college for the first 2 years and then went to another 4-year college, they've got a lot of grit. And I don't think that should be diminished. And I know people are going to be irritated with me for saying that, and I'm totally okay with that. I think it's the same reason why, if you are only looking at Ivy Leagues and you don't put, other universities on there where more people of color attend, that's a problem. So you just want a person of color or a woman who went to, a top 20 university or college. That's the only value that they bring. What about, they went to maybe a state school, but they were president of their student council, or they were president of their newspaper, or they were president of the robotics club, or they worked full time and still got a 4.0, or they worked full time and they got a 2.9. I think that's impressive regardless. And
So,
an
so you're
internship, I think all those things need to be part of the conversation. And they're
right. So
not.
you're talking about ambition. So how would you be able to use AI without bias to uncover ambition?
Well, I mean, I think, AI in the hiring process isn't going to give it to someone who doesn't deserve it. They're not going to say, here's this person who we think is really nice and, they're hardworking and we're going to present them for this job. You have to want it. You have to be qualified for the job. What I'm saying, and I think what people across the board are saying, is that, my parents were very involved in my life, right? Was fortunate enough to have the best parents you could possibly have. And not everybody is so lucky. Not everybody got the parents that I had. Maybe they only had one parent. Maybe they had a parent that was incarcerated. Maybe they didn't get that forward momentum. They didn't get that talk of you can do anything you want to do. Does that mean that they didn't have that same opportunity to do an internship. Maybe they got a little bit of a later start. Maybe they didn't find their mojo till they were, 30. Maybe it took them a while to find their path, and then they did. I still think they need to be part of the conversation. And it's, if you haven't had the opportunity to have a really kick-ass, middle school teacher or grade school teacher or high school teacher, maybe because each teacher had 50 kids in their class. They're just trying to get through the day. And I think that's where, you have to also give people an opportunity to prove themselves and to get a foot in the door of those organizations. I didn't get to where I'm at because I'm so brilliant. I mean, please. I got here because people let me stand on their shoulders. They gave me an opportunity. They opened the door. I'm not going to say I didn't work really freaking hard, right? And I didn't try to overachieve in every single opportunity I had, because I did. But someone opened up the door. I mean, in fact, so this is an interesting story. So the other day, my husband and I were out with another couple for happy hour, and there was a server, and I was like, this just doesn't seem like the place that this kid is supposed to be. I don't know why he got my attention, but he did. And I was like, so, what's your name and how did you start here? And he's like, my name is Alec, and I'm getting my degree in neuroscience, and I am I'm trying to write an app, to help people communicate who have a brain impairment.
Wow.
Okay. How would I have ever even so I set up time, I talked with him, I've connected him with people. Now it's up to him, right? But I think that's where, we put systems in place of people at times to be able to do that, because, HR people they're inundated, and they're the person and the teams that get reduced because it's not a profit sharing, right? It's not a revenue generating spot. And I think as CEOs and as a CEO, you got to look at HR through a completely different lens. They are the heartbeat of the company. They bring in the right people for the right jobs, give them the tools that they need to be successful. And guess what? Your different teams and the hiring managers are going to get more qualified, more diverse people if you give the HR teams the tools they need to be successful. And not give them the tools where they're getting pounded every day saying you're not getting diverse enough candidates, and they maybe don't even know why they aren't getting enough diverse candidates. So that's where I think, but I love the really smart questions. I know I appreciate that, because all those questions are going to make us better and are going to make sure that we continue to build software that is welcoming to people.
Mm-hmm. And how do you address it? Say I'm in a company and I am an HR person and I am overloaded, and yeah, sure, I would love all of this stuff, but we have a system, the system works. And now you're talking about all this other stuff, and how do you broach that topic with the HR people who are maybe not even open to it?
I mean, there are a certain group that aren't open to what I'm saying, for sure. But the reality is that diversity matters. And when you don't have enough diversity in your company, people are going to wonder why. And there's only one department that they're going to be able to look at for answers.
Mm-hmm.
So they better come to the party with some answers.
So how do you walk in? What does the process look like? You said you had a scorecard. Tell us about that.
Okay, well, so we haven't even actually started to sell our software.
Amazing.
We just are doing a handful of pilots that, knock on wood, have been very successful. And we're taking the results from those pilots, because we want this to be collaborative. We want to understand what it's like from their end and what are their pain points and how can we build to address them as well. But the scorecard, without giving too much away, because no one's doing it right now. But, we can say, here are the amount of diverse candidates that have come through. And we're basing that on sort of national guidelines. And saying, okay, here's the amount that have gotten through. Here are the resumes that didn't get through that were diverse candidates, and here's why, because of how your system is reviewing the resumes, why they weren't reviewed, and all of those things can get corrected, right? And so we're not trying to say, hey, you guys are doing this intentionally, you're doing a bad job. What we are saying is like, listen, be open to having the conversation with us because we're here to make you better. And we're not here to say your existing ATS system is the devil. What we are saying is that there are areas where they can improve and we can help, and here's where we can bridge that gap.
And what happens in companies where, or is it even possible that they go through, they think they have non-biased software, but yet there seems to be a very typical candidate constantly being hired?
Yeah.
Would you be tweaking your software to deal with that, or would you say it won't happen with my software?
It would be very difficult for them to tweak their existing software with the way that if they're using AI or machine learning or algorithms to fix, because of how the AI and how it learns, and how the algorithms develop and become more integrated in their software. That's where we can come in and be a bolt-on solution and sort of bypass that part. Because there's a lot of really great parts about applicant tracking systems. And then there's the not so great parts. And that's where we sort of come on and we can bolt on and be the bridge or the stopgap for that solution. And so that, we're not asking them to, we're not trying to replace an ATS system, but we do know that what we've built can make them less biased, and we can show them the algorithms. We can say, here's where it's biased. Here's where it shows this on a scorecard. Here's where it shows the number of resumes that have come through. Here's where it shows the number of people that have been reviewed or emailed to, or there's been a phone screening of some kind. But at the end of this, companies also have to make sure that they have diverse hiring teams, and that you're not just leaving it up to one or two people to decide how that filtering of that candidate is going to look.
And that's something your
No,
software can't do.
our software cannot do that. But, we are partnering with a handful of different companies that can take on that part of it. And I think most companies want to be open to this. I don't think that, you've got people in a boardroom saying, I don't want to hire women. I don't want to hire, Asian people. I don't want to hire African American people. I don't want to hire, people. I mean, maybe there are, and those companies will bubble to the top.
So this is and I've said this to you off interview. I've said I think this is a global movement kind of software. This is
I
nothing
really
that we should.
appreciate that.
Well, this is no small matter. Getting rid
No.
of bias in hiring and making diversity and inclusiveness a staple in all corporations. Talk to me about what this would look like for our governments.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, I think that the agencies that we talk to, number one, want to figure out if it's something that they could use within their software solutions, and absolutely it can, and we could even revamp it for them. I mean, we're not a software development company, but certainly we can take parts of our software and attune it to them. I mean, especially with people within the military, how their resumes and their experience is reviewed is vastly different than a civilian resume would be reviewed and parsed. I mean, they have completely different vernaculars, even within each branch of the military. I think
Wow.
for the federal government, I mean, I think that we do need to have a certain level of accountability. And even in schools, there should be a level of accountability in how are you deciding what applicants get through to be part of what school? What are you measuring?
Because And we discussed this very briefly, but there's not just the bias that you would expect where people are trying to choose their own, but they're also
Mhm.
trying to exclude to some degree
Yes,
that which might challenge their belief systems or their whatever it is.
absolutely. And that's like what, thank you for bringing that up because, you know, we aren't trying to be, like the police force of software, right? But what we are trying to do is make sure that things are agnostic. And so that,
Good word.
let's just say you come from a very, very conservative Christian school, right? Or you come from a college university that is based in a different theology. Maybe it's a very strong Muslim school, and that's what it is. And their candidates are having a hard time getting interviews. We would find that out. We would be able to isolate those specific instances. And, we want it to be agnostic and we want it to be equitable and fair. And, I remember when first with entry, when we figured out that there was a resume issue, and I thought, God, I don't have a resume. I haven't had one in a long time. So I built one and it was atrocious. So it was so bad. Really, really bad. And then so I hired someone to help me fix it. And I was like, okay, this is solid. And I thought, okay, I'm going to see if there really is a resume issue. So I applied to 37 different jobs that I was probably at least 90% and above qualified for. Nothing. Crickets. And I thought, if I were to be looking for a job right now, I would feel really bad, right? I would feel like, wow, I feel like I'm qualified and I have really great experience and I have lots of things to share. And, I'm really good at growing companies. I'm really good at building teams and I'm really good at, like, huh. But then I thought, how bad would it feel if you were really looking for a job and you only had enough savings to cover 1 or 2 months of expenses, and then you might be homeless. Like, just like think about that for 1 second, and you are applying to every job you think you're qualified for, and you are not getting any responses, and the ripple effect that that would have on your life, financially, emotionally, in your relationship, socially. It's like it's this giant ball that gets going, and then it gets bigger and it gets bigger and it gets bigger. And I don't think people understand the impact of that, like the societal, I'm going to even say global impact that that has on cities, on states, on countries. And that's part of this fix.
Mm-hmm.
So anti-bias.tech, we're tackling all of that.
You're also attacking nepotism in the workplace too.
100%. 100%.
There's going to be some kickback or some fight back on that.
Hey, listen, if the person is qualified, then they should have the job. I believe that. I've got kids. I would love to have my kids show an interest in in any of my companies. So far, like
Same
not
here.
nothing. They have no interest in this. But I wouldn't just come in and be like, "Hey, you're a VP." You would have to work your way up. You'd have to earn it. And again, there's public companies are held to a different standard than private companies are held to. And for fair reasons. I think, that whole public versus private is some murky area. And I wouldn't want someone to say, I can't give I couldn't give my husband a job, or I couldn't give, my cousin a job if they were qualified to do that. Right. At the end of the day, it's my company. I get to make some of those decisions. On the flip side of that, I also have a moral obligation to give people who are qualified an opportunity to apply and to be part of my company.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I mentioned earlier, I had some amazing mentors that opened doors for me, that allowed me to fail, that allowed me to learn, allowed me to put my mouth in my foot, or my foot in my mouth, excuse me. I thought that was, see, I mean, I did not try to do that, for example. Um, so I think that that's, you know, you gotta have those. And you know, this isn't like a clear line of this is right and this is wrong, except when you don't give anybody an opportunity because you're discriminating against them for their race, their gender, their age, right? Their
Mm-hmm.
who they choose to love.
Yeah.
And I think that's this conversation, and this is going to be an ongoing conversation. And I'm not saying I have all the answers to the test, but I certainly am going to put myself out there and be like, okay, so let's talk about it. I'm always
Mm-hmm.
open to having a conversation, just like I was open to having the conversation. Although I'm not going to lie, I might have to count backward. My daughter wanted to have the conversation about I can't say certain things because it comes off as a microaggression. I didn't understand what she meant, but I do now, and I'm way more mindful of it. And I think as a society, we have to be more mindful of how things have happened in the past and how we handle things going forward in the future.
Yeah.
So,
And I really like what you're talking about, the gray zone, because I think the tendency that we have in society is to take what has been said and make it as polarized and black and white as we possibly can, and then to jump on one
mhm,
side or the other. And you're either vilifying or victorizing, making this person into a great hero. And there's not a lot of gray. And I think with this conversation, and specifically when it comes to things like nepotism, it's intention, and it's a delicate conversation. At best, it's a delicate conversation. It is like surgery. It is such a delicate conversation, because where is the area? Where's the where do you fall on what side and why, and is that right or wrong?
yeah, I mean, it's you're right. I mean, I think there are, but it goes back to that book I was telling you about that I love, and it's oh my gosh, no, I oh Jennifre, and I totally forgot about what the name was just now. It'll come back to me in a second.
The
Um,
Anatomy of
Peace. Thank
Peace.
you. I love you. But you know, part of that book was so brilliant to me because they were talking about, you know, 1,000 years ago when there was a Turkish leader that was the most successful conqueror, but also some of the most peaceful. And he listened to people, and he, even when he was conquering a country or a city, and people like, how can you say that this person was a good conqueror? And it was like, you know, because he looked at the cities or the territories as people versus objects. Less people died. He, you know, he sent people away with money. He had conversations with leaders about like, listen, we could do this or we could do this. Let's see if we can discuss it first before, you know, it goes to war. And I think that's such an important conversation because everybody always wants to be right, and nobody wants to compromise, and nobody wants to move. And in order to have a conversation, someone has to agree that they may not be right. And I'm willing to have that first conversation. I may not be right, but I'm willing to have that conversation with anybody that wants to have it with me.
But is it
Because
possible that both of you could be right? That both of your intentions, based on how you were
yeah,
raised and what you know, are indeed right?
absolutely. Therein lies the conversation.
Mm.
Therein lies the the being open and vulnerable to saying, you know, there's probably a place that we can meet in the middle. And I think that, you know, that's part of what we are trying to bridge with the software is first to identify, hey, you're wondering why you're not getting diverse applicants. And here's why. It's not to say you're a bad company, you've done anything wrong. It's to say, here's how much better you can be. And I think that really is the message, is we can all do so much better. We can all be so much better if we agree that we're not always right, if we agree that people matter, regardless of their beliefs, their color of their skin, their gender, their religion, the zip code that they live in, the school that they went to. I mean, I kind of think that that is like where the conversation starts. And I think people are ready for it. Not all people are going to be ready for it. And I understand that. But if we don't start having the conversations that make us uncomfortable, how do we ever move anything forward? How do we ever create the catalyst for change?
You
You
said
know,
some, oh, sorry.
no, I'm good.
You said something really powerful that I want to just rewind back to. You were talking about a shared vision for the future. And if we're talking about a shared vision, we're not talking about who's right and who's wrong. We're not talking about whether you were good or bad or whether your software did anything. We're talking
Yeah.
about where we want to get to. It's a completely different conversation. It's almost like you, in that moment, removed everything except that we were aligned in a common goal.
Yeah.
I love that.
I think, who doesn't want to have the best company that they can have? Who doesn't want to have the best people for the job? I mean, like, do you want to have someone flying your plane who is not super qualified? I mean, I'm just asking probably not, right? Do you do you want somebody, fixing your plumbing who, watched a YouTube video who hasn't apprenticed? Probably not,
Less important,
you
but
know.
probably not.
But I mean, it's having had my ceiling collapse on me. It's important that you have the right people, but that you also give people the opportunity to have that experience. And I think, we need to eliminate some of the filters. I think we need to also change some of the lenses that we look at the world through. Um, that's not an anti-bias thing. That's just my personal opinion. And I'm sure I'm going to get some feedback, and that's okay.
It's
Uh,
feedback.
it's feedback. And I just feel like we're at this really pivotal moment in our culture where, what we've built can be part of the catalyst for change and can start the conversation in a bad way. As I've said, this isn't to look at anybody and say you're doing a terrible job. It's to say, how can we do better? How can we help you do better? How can you help yourself be better and attract more people to your companies that you want?
Yeah, the shared vision. How can we get the best possible people in? That's it.
That is it. That really, truly is it. Mhm.
And I love that. I I have one more question for you, because I was just thinking about this. If you remove all of the, I don't want to call them all superficial, but really they are the superficial, the bias points. There are going to be some people out there who have a lot of trouble finding a job because that's what they rely on, the names and the titles and the,
Yeah, but I mean, there are so many open jobs, and I think that there really is a place for everyone, and that, you know, maybe there are certain people that need to go back and take a pause and relook at things, and not always having to be right is a very lonely place,
yeah.
I think.
Mm-hmm.
I think being able to say, again, in this book, there was a CEO of this big company, and he lost half of his 5 executives because they said, "Hey, you're micromanaging me. You're not giving me enough space to do my job. I implemented this new plan, and you took it away and you didn't have a conversation with me. And this the CEO in this book, his response was, but you wouldn't be who you were if I wouldn't have given you this opportunity. I made you. And I think that there's a lot of people that feel that way, that feel there's sort of this quid pro quo. If I do this for you, then you do this for me, instead of saying, you know what, you as a VP of sales helped build my company from a, $1 million corporation into a $500 million corporation. I wouldn't have been able to do that without your prowess and your vision and your ability to execute. And I think a lot of people get caught up in that. And it's, every sentence starts with I. And it's like, as the CEO of a company where we had 10,000 people, I can assure you that it was not an I situation. It was a we situation. I may have set a tone, I may have set the direction, but it was the people that made it go forward, that made it grow. And I think people lose sight of that's how things work generally most successfully.
So before we wrap
and in
this,
the end,
in the end, sorry.
no, I was just going to say, in the end, the CEO learned the right solutions. And I think all of us sometimes have fallen and failed. And that's generally where we have our greatest teaching and our greatest learning point. It's not, at least for me, it hasn't always come from my success.
I've read that in so many, it might sound tropey, but personal development, it's the one thing they'll say, your greatest lessons come from your greatest failures, or sorry, your greatest moments of feedback, your challenges.
Yeah, or in my case, failure. Because it wasn't a feedback situation. It was more of just an epic fail. Like, oh, and wow.
Belly flop?
Yeah. Yeah. Really painful. But
they hurt and they leave a mark and everyone sees.
Yeah, pretty visible fail. So yeah, but that's okay. I learned from it, and it made me better. It pushed me.
So what is in store? Your greatest, you said you're launching this. I know you were in Washington the other week. You've been talking to people, you're making things happen. What is your vision for your company? Where do you see it going?
Well, that is a really deep question, and I appreciate the opportunity to answer it. Really, my vision is to really level the playing field for everybody, and for people to have an opportunity that they may not have had in the past, and for bias and discrimination to become something that we don't talk about every day on the news. It's not every day in a hiring conversation, that we get past, the gender, color, university, that we only are having conversations about right person, right job, right cultural fit for that team. And we watch companies soar and grow because there's a different sense of unity. And that at antibias.tech, that we facilitated that growth and that change and that unity. That's my hope.
Ooh, that's juicy. I like that. Well, I'm a massive fan of what you're doing. So yes, that tickles all of the right giblets. So people who are watching this is what I would say is sweet sausages here, ladies and gentlemen. And no, it's not a Canadian term. I was asked that by one of my other interviewees. It's just a me thing. But how do people that are watching this, and Google and SpaceX and all these companies are going to need your software. So how do people get in touch with you, get in on your pilots? How do government officials contact you? How do they get in on this?
Okay, so they can go to antibias.tech. They can email me at J, and then my last name, Sethre, Sethre, at antibias.tech. And I'd give my cell phone number out, but that's not advisable. So I
It
actually have
depends.
done that before, and it's not good. And but I would love to have people's feedback, pro and con. And I really appreciate the opportunity and using your platform to really talk about something that is so important to me and you and I think really just our world, actually.
Something else I would love to throw out there, and by the way, like, I haven't brought this up with Jennifre at all, so this is going to blindside her. Would you be open to roundtable discussions from people who might want to talk to you and say, these are the things that I think might be
Yes,
problems, and these are the
I would
feedback I'd
love
love to.
it. I would love it. Totally open to it.
Awesome. If you're
Yep.
interested in such things, either comment below this video. That down there is where I found everything goes on the YouTubes. Oh, did I just say the, okay, well, there we go. It's out there. Or you can email Jennifre directly. You can reach out to her on LinkedIn, all of those things. I will also be putting the links. They'll be just down there. And before we wrap, is there anything else you would like to leave the audience with today?
I think just thanks for watching and the opportunity and the future conversations. And to you, I appreciate you and value you so much. And you are just, as I said earlier, just a magical human being. And I'm so grateful to know you. So thank you.
I just about knocked my computer down. Thank you so much, Jennifre.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for coming out today.
Cheers.